The morning light on Vernon Prime was different from Earth's sun. Two golden orbs hung in the purple sky, casting soft shadows across the crystal fields where the Kalathi grew their glowing crops. Commander Zara Velenith stood on the observation deck of the defense station, watching her people tend to their farms with the same gentle care they had shown for 300 years. Zara was tall for a Kalathi, nearly 7 feet, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Her large, dark eyes could see colors that humans never dreamed of, and right now they saw something terrible moving through the space between stars. Commander called her aide, a young Kalathi named Kasara. The deep space sensors are picking up movement at the edge of our system. Zara turned from the window and walked to the main console. The holographic display showed dozens of dark shapes moving toward their world. They were big. Much bigger than any Kalathi ship had ever been. Run identification scans, Zara ordered, though her heart was already sinking. She had heard stories. From other worlds, whispered tales of a race that swept through space like a plague. The computer worked for several minutes before giving its answer. Ships match known patterns of the Kroger hegemony. Its estimated arrival time, 6 hours. Kazara made a small noise of fear. The Kroger were known throughout the galaxy as destroyers. They took what they wanted and left only empty worlds behind. Send word to all cities, Zara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Tell them to prepare the shelters. Contact the council and tell them we need to meet immediately. The next few hours passed like a nightmare. The Kalathi had never been warriors. Their ships were built for exploration and trade, not fighting. Their weapons were designed to clear asteroids, not stop an invasion. When the Kroger fleet arrived, it blotted out both suns. The enemy ships were massive and dark, covered in spikes and armor that looked like the shells of giant insects. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of deadly beetles floating. Through space, says General Thakmer of the Kroger hegemony, came a harsh voice over the communication channels. This world now belongs to the Kroger Empire. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Zara looked around the command center at her people. They were scientists, farmers, artists. They had never hurt anyone in their lives, but she had to try. Is Commander Zara Velenith of Vernon Prime? She replied. We are a peaceful people. We have done nothing to harm you. Please leave us in peace. The Kroger general laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Peace is for the weak. You will work for the Kroger, or you will die. The attack began without warning. Beams of red energy lanced down from the Kroger ships, striking the Kalathi defense platforms. The shields that had protected them from space, rocks and solar storms vanished like soap bubbles. Zara watched in horror as her world's defenses crumbled. The few Kalathi ships that tried to fight were swatted aside like insects. Within an hour, Kroger landing craft were descending toward the surface. Commander called her communications officer, an elderly Kalathi named Morden. We're receiving. Surrender offers from 17 cities. They're asking for instructions. Zara closed her eyes. If her people fought, they would die. If they surrendered, they would become slaves. There was no good choice. Tell them to evacuate the civilians, she said finally. Get everyone to the deep shelters. But even as she spoke, she knew it wouldn't be enough. The Kroger had ships that could crack planets open like eggs. The shelters would only delay the inevitable. The Kroger ground forces landed like a metal storm. Their soldiers were 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor that looked like black metal. They had 4 arms each and weapons that fired beams of pure destruction. The Kalathi security forces tried to resist, but it was like children fighting giants. Their stun weapons did nothing to the Kroger armor. Their barriers were smashed aside by enemy soldiers who barely seemed to notice them. Within 3 hours, the capital city was in Kroger hands. The aliens began rounding up civilians, separating families, and loading them onto transport ships. The old and sick were simply left behind. Zara found herself trapped in the command bunker with a handful of survivors. Outside, she could hear the sound of destruction as the Kroger began tearing down everything the Kalathi had built. We failed them, whispered Kessera, tears streaming down her blue face. We couldn't protect anyone. Zara stared at the communication console. There was one thing left she could do. The deep space transmitter was still working somehow. She could send a message to the galaxy, tell someone what was happening here. "Help me get this working," she said to Morden. The old Calethi nodded and began adjusting the controls. The transmitter was powerful enough to reach other star systems, but who would listen? Who would care about a world full of peaceful people being destroyed by monsters? Zara sat down at the transmitter and began to speak. "This is Commander Zara Velenith of Varen Prime. We are a peaceful people under attack by the Kroger hegemony. Our defenses have failed. Our people are dying. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. We have children here. We have done nothing wrong. Please, if there is anyone out there who cares about innocent lives, we need your help." She sent the message out into the dark between stars, not knowing if anyone would hear it or if they would care. The Kroger were strong, and strength was all that seemed to matter in the galaxy. 3 weeks away, on a small human research ship, Lieutenant Jake Morrison was monitoring deep space communications when the message came through. He was young for a ship's officer, only 20, with short brown hair and the kind face that smiled easily, but he wasn't smiling now. The voice that came through the static was filled with such pain and fear that it made Jake's chest hurt. He had never heard of the Calethi, but he could tell they were people just like him. People with families and dreams, people who just wanted to live in peace. Jake didn't hesitate. He forwarded the message directly to Admiral Lisa Kane at Terra Command. Along with his own note, "Admiral, these people need help. We can't just let this happen." Admiral Kane was 53 years old, with gray hair and scars from humanities. Recent wars with space pirates. She had seen enough death and destruction to last several lifetimes. But when she heard Zara's plea, she felt something stir in her chest that she thought had died long ago. Hope. "Get me fleet command," she ordered her aide, Captain Rick Hayes, "and send a message to every human ship in the sector. Tell them we're going to do something that's never been done before." Rick looked confused. "What are we going to do, Admiral?" Kane stood up, her jaw set with determination. "We're going to save people we've never met, on a world we've never seen, because someone asked us for help." She paused at the window, looking out at the stars. "And because it's the right thing to do?" The message that Admiral Kane sent out spread through human space like wildfire. It reached mining colonies on the edge of nowhere, corporate headquarters in shining cities, and independent traders drifting between the stars. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of something bigger than any one person or ship. People are dying. They asked for help. "We're going." On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, dock worker Pete Sullivan was loading cargo containers when the message came through the public channels. He stopped what he was doing and stared at the screen, reading the words twice to make sure he understood them right. "Hey, boss," he called to his supervisor. "I quit." His supervisor, a heavy-set man named Carl, looked up from his paperwork. "What do you mean you quit? You've got 3 more hours on your shift?" Pete was already walking toward the exit. "There's people dying out there. I'm going to help." Carl shouted after him, but Pete didn't look back. He had a small cargo ship that he used 4 weekend runs to the outer colonies. It wasn't much, but it could fly, and that was enough. The story was the same across dozens of worlds. Captain Amy Rodriguez was delivering mining equipment to an asteroid belt when the call came through. She looked at her cargo manifest, then at the message on her screen. The mining equipment was worth 50,000 credits. The people on Varen Prime were worth more. "Sorry, boys," she said to her crew. "Change of plans." She dumped the cargo at the nearest station and set course for the rally point that Admiral Kane had broadcast. Her ship, the Steady Hand, was just a cargo hauler, but Rodriguez had served in the Colonial Marines before becoming a trader. Knew how to fight. The rally point was an empty patch of space near the edge of human territory. Ships began arriving within hours of Kane's message. First came the military vessels, sleek destroyers and cruisers from the Terran Navy. Then came the corporate security fleets. Their ships painted in company colors, but armed with military-grade weapons. But it was the civilian ships that made Admiral Kane's throat tight with emotion. Cargo haulers and passenger liners, mining ships and exploration vessels, even a few luxury yachts, whose owners had decided that saving lives was more important than comfort. Captain Ben Cross arrived. In his ship, the Iron Wolf, along with a small fleet of vessels that had seen better days. Cross was a former pirate who had gone legitimate, but his reputation still made people nervous. He was a tall man with scars on his face and eyes that had seen too much. "Admiral," he said when he contacted Kane's flagship, "I hear you're looking for volunteers." Kane studied the man on her screen. She knew his history, knew that he had once been on the wrong side of the law. But she also knew that he had never hurt innocent people. "Can you fight?" she asked. Cross smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Admiral, I've been fighting my whole life. The only difference now is I'm fighting for the right side." The fleet that assembled over the next few days was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Nearly 800 ships, ranging from massive battleships to tiny fighters. They came from every part of human space, crewed by people who had never met but shared the same simple belief. When someone asked for help, you helped. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived on a research vessel to brief the fleet commanders. Though she was a small woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes, one of the galaxy's leading experts on alien biology. She stood before the holographic display showing hundreds of ship captains and explained what they were facing. "The Calathi are peaceful by nature," she said. "Their world has low gravity and a mild climate. They've never needed to develop the aggressive instincts that warfare requires. To most of the galaxy, we humans are what they call Deathworlders." Captain from one of the corporate fleets spoke up. "Wait, what does that mean?" "It means we come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years," Elena replied. "We evolved on a planet with deadly weather, dangerous animals, and disasters that wiped out entire species. We learned to adapt, to fight, to survive no matter what the universe threw at us." She paused, looking at the faces on the screen. "The Calathi look at us and see monsters. But right now, they need monsters on their side." The technical challenge of reaching Vern Prime in time seemed impossible. The journey would normally take 3 weeks, but the Calathi didn't have 3 weeks. Admiral Kane's engineers had worked for days on a solution that sounded like science fiction. Commander Tony Walsh was the fleet's chief engineer, a quiet man who had spent his career making impossible things work. He explained the plan to the assembled captains with the calm voice of someone who had seen enough miracles to believe in one more. "We're going to link our hyperspace drives together," he said. "Create a cascade effect that will carry the entire fleet across space in 5 days instead of 3 weeks." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Captain Cross spoke up. "What are the chances of this working?" Walsh was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, about 50-50. Half of us might not make it. The other half might arrive scattered across light years of empty space." "And if we don't try?" asked Captain Rodriguez. "Then the Calathi die, and we live with that for the rest of our lives." The vote was unanimous. 800 ships, 800 crews, all willing to risk everything for people they had never met. The preparation took 2 days. Engineers worked around the clock to modify hyperspace drives and link them together. Supply ships moved between vessels, distributing ammunition and spare parts. Medical teams prepared for casualties. On the morning of the jump, Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UTS Defiant, and looked out at the greatest fleet in human history. Ships stretched as far as the eye could see. They're running, lights twinkling like stars. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane," she said over the fleet channel. "In 30 seconds, we're going to attempt something that's never been done before. We're going to cross the galaxy in 5 days to save people who don't even know we exist." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew, young and old, male and female. They all shared the same determined expression. "I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. Some of us might not make it. But I can't think of a better reason to risk everything than to answer the call of people who need our help." The countdown began. 10 seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. The fleet jumped. space twisted around them like a living thing. The stars stretched into lines of light, then collapsed into points of fire. The cascade effect grabbed the ships and hurled them across the galaxy at speeds that made hyperspace look slow. Some ships were lost in the chaos, their drives failing under the massive strain. Others found themselves thrown off course, scattered across empty space. But most of the fleet held together, riding the wave of twisted space-time toward a world where people were dying and hope was running out. Admiral Kane watched the stars blur past and thought about the message that had started it all. A desperate plea from a woman who had never heard of Earth, broadcast into the darkness with no real hope of an answer. Soon, that woman would learn that sometimes, when you cry out for help, the universe sends 800 ships full of humans who believe that doing the right thing is worth dying for. The Deathworlder Armada was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. While the human fleet raced across space, the nightmare on Vern Prime grew worse with each passing hour. The Kroger had been efficient in their conquest, landing massive industrial ships that began tearing apart the planet's surface like hungry beasts. General Thakmer stood in his command center aboard the orbital platform, watching the destruction below through multiple screens. He was enormous, even by Kroger standards, nearly 10 feet tall, with black armor that seemed to be part of his body. His forearms moved constantly, adjusting controls and giving orders to his subordinates. Report, he clicked in the harsh Kroger language. His aide, a smaller Kroger with specialized sensor organs, scuttled forward. Mining operations are ahead of schedule. General, we have extracted 40% of the rare minerals in the northern continent. The southern cities have been cleared for processing. Thakmer's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The Kalathi had put up even less resistance than expected. Her security forces had surrendered rather than see civilians hurt. Weak creatures, he thought, unworthy of the resources they possessed. On the planet's surface, the Kroger ground forces moved through the captured cities like a plague of metal insects. Major Vexstar led a battalion of warriors through the capital, their heavy footsteps crushing the delicate crystal walkways that the Kalathi had built with such care. The Kroger soldiers were built for war. Their natural armor could stop most weapons, and their multiple arms allowed them to carry heavy equipment that would require a team of other species to operate. They saw the Kalathi art and architecture not as beauty, but as obstacles to be removed. Burn it all, Vexstar ordered his troops as they reached the cultural district. We need clear landing zones for the processing equipment. The ancient Kalathi libraries went up in flames. Sculptures that had taken decades to grow were smashed apart by Kroger weapons. The bioluminescent gardens that had fed the cities for generations were torn up to make room for mining platforms. Commander Zara Veleneth watched the destruction from her hiding place in the emergency bunker beneath the defense station. She had managed to gather 37 survivors, including Kazara and the elderly council speaker, Morden. They had food and water for a few more days, but after that, they would have to surrender or starve. The commander whispered Kazara, pointing to one of the security monitors. Look at this. The screen showed a Kroger processing center that had been set up in what used to be the city's main square. Hundreds of Kalathi were being sorted into groups. Young and strong were loaded onto transport ships, destined for slave labor in Kroger mines. The elderly and weak were simply left behind to die. Zara watched in horror as families were torn apart. Parents reached for their children as Kroger soldiers dragged them in different directions.
Out.
The aliens showed no emotion, no recognition that they were destroying lives. To them, the Kalathi were just resources to be processed. Why? Asked young Kasara, her voice breaking. Why do they hate us so much? Old Morden, who had lived through 3 centuries of peace, tried to explain. They do not hate us, child. To them, we are not even alive in the way they understand life. We are soft things that happen to be sitting on minerals they want. The Kroger philosophy was simple and brutal. Strength was the only truth in the universe. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak existed only to serve or be consumed. They had conquered dozens of worlds using this logic, and it had never failed them before. But the Kroger had never encountered humans. In the depths of space, something was happening that would have been impossible to any other species in the galaxy. The human fleet had successfully completed their dangerous hyperspace jump, emerging from the twisted space between stars like an avalanche of metal and fire. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the UTS Defiant, watching as her fleet reformed. In the outer system of Vern Prime, the jump had been costly. 43 ships had been lost in the chaos, their crews scattered across light years of empty space. But over 700 vessels had made it through, and they burned with a fury that made space itself seem to tremble. Admiral, reported Captain Hayes from the sensor station, "We're detecting Kroger forces in orbit around the planet. Approximately 200 vessels, mostly heavy cruisers and assault ships." Kane studied the tactical display. The Kroger fleet was arranged in a tight formation around Vern Prime, their ships positioned to provide maximum firepower coverage. It was a strong defensive position, the kind that military textbooks said was nearly impossible to break. Kane smiled grimly. Humans had never been very good at following textbooks. The Kroger detected the massive human fleet just as it finished. Forming up, General Thakmer stared at his tactical display in confusion. Nearly 800 ships had appeared from nowhere, their design unlike anything in his database. "What species is this?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. The smaller Kroger worked frantically at his console. "Unknown, General." The ship designs appear to be from multiple construction philosophies, but they are broadcasting a single identification: Terran Federation. Thakmer had never heard of humans, but the size of the fleet gave him pause. The Kroger had ruled through superior numbers and firepower for centuries. No one had ever dared to challenge them with such a massive force. "Send a warning transmission," he ordered. "Tell them this world is under Kroger protection and they must withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The message that reached Admiral Kane was translated by the ship's computer, but the meaning was clear: leave or die. It was the same ultimatum the Kroger had given to countless worlds before crushing them under their metal boots. Kane looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were young and old, from every corner of human space. Some had been soldiers, others had been farmers or miners or teachers. But right now, they all shared the same expression of cold determination. "Send a reply," Kane ordered her communications officer. "What should I tell them, Admiral?" Kane thought about Commander Velanessa's desperate plea, about the families being torn apart in the processing centers below, about all the worlds that had died because no one had been strong enough or crazy enough to stand up to bullies like the Kroger. "Tell them," she said quietly, "that the humans have arrived, and we don't like what we see." The response that came back from the Kroger was predictable. Threats, demands, promises of destruction. Thakmer could not believe that any species would be foolish enough to challenge Kroger supremacy. He had conquered peaceful worlds and enslaved warrior races. What could these unknown aliens possibly do that he had not seen before? He was about to find out. Captain Rodriguez, commanding her squadron of armed cargo ships, received the attack order with grim satisfaction. She had been hauling freight for 15 years, dodging pirates and corporate security forces, learning to fight with whatever weapons she could afford. Now she finally had a chance to use those skills for something that mattered. "All ships," she broadcast to her squadron, "remember what we're here for. Those are innocent people down there, and these bugs think they can just take what they want. Let's show them what happens when you mess with somebody's family." The battle for Vern Prime was about to begin. The Kroger were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy called humans Deathworlders. The first shots of the battle came when Kroger patrol ships intercepted a small group of human scouts near the edge of the system. General Thakmer watched the engagement from his command ship, expecting to see his forces easily destroy the unknown aliens. What he saw instead made his mandibles click in confusion. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever encountered. Instead of forming neat battle lines like civilized species, they scattered in all directions, using tactics that seemed to have no pattern at all. A converted cargo ship suddenly accelerated straight at a Kroger cruiser, firing weapons that had clearly been bolted on as an afterthought. "What are they doing?" Thakmer demanded of his tactical officer.
This makes no sense.
Lieutenant Sam Parker was piloting that cargo ship, a vessel he had bought with his savings from years of racing on the illegal circuits of the outer colonies. The ship was fast, lightly armored, and armed with mining lasers that he had modified, in ways that probably violated dozens of safety regulations. "Come on, baby," he whispered to his ship as Kroger fighters closed in on him. "Let's show these bugs how we do things." Parker's ship dove toward the Kroger cruiser, rolling and spinning in patterns that would have made a military pilot sick. The Kroger gunners tried to track him, but their weapons were designed for targets that moved in predictable ways. Parker didn't do predictable. At the last second, he pulled up and raked the Kroger ship's hull with his modified lasers. The beams cut through armor plating like a hot knife through butter, sending pieces of metal spinning into space. Then he was past, accelerating away as the damaged cruiser tried to turn and follow. "This is Parker to Fleet Command," he called over the radio, grinning despite the danger. "These things can't turn worth a damn. They fight like flying bricks." The information spread through the human fleet instantly. Captain Cross, watching from the bridge of the Iron Wolf, smiled his dangerous smile. He had fought pirates in corporate security for most of his adult life, and he knew how to use an enemy's weaknesses against them. "All ships," he broadcast, "to his squadron of former pirates and smugglers, form up on me. We're going to teach these bugs about creative violence." Cross led his ships in what looked like a retreat, drawing a group of Kroger pursuit vessels away from the main fleet. The aliens followed standard tactical doctrine, maintaining formation as they chased what they thought were fleeing enemies. They flew straight into the trap that Cross had prepared, hidden among the asteroids of the system's outer belt. More human ships waited in ambush. As the Kroger ships passed between the rocky hiding places, the humans opened fire from all sides at once. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Cross said, as his weapons lit up the darkness. The Kroger ships found themselves surrounded by enemies that had appeared from nowhere. Their formation, so perfect for delivering overwhelming firepower, became a liability when they couldn't turn quickly enough to face threats coming from multiple directions. Within minutes, half the pursuit force was destroyed or disabled. The survivors retreated in disorder, their perfect discipline shattered by an attack that violated everything they thought they knew about warfare. General Ekmer watched his forces fall back and felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. These humans fought like madmen, using tactics that seemed designed by lunatics. How could he fight an enemy that refused to follow the rules? "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender." Thokmer's mandibles clicked with rage. "Send a reply. Tell them that the Kroger Empire does not surrender to anyone." The human response came from Admiral Kane herself. Her voice was calm, but there was something in it that made even the Kroger general pause. "General Thakmer," she said, "my name is Lisa Kane, and I represent the human species. You have attacked a peaceful world and enslaved innocent people. You have one chance to withdraw your forces and release your prisoners. If you refuse, we will destroy you." Thakmer laughed. "Ah, sound like grinding metal. You think your small fleet can defeat the might of the Kroger? We have conquered 100 worlds. We will add your bones to the pile." There was a long pause before Kane replied. When she spoke again, her voice was colder than the space between stars. "General, you've conquered peaceful farmers and unarmed. Traders, you've never fought humans before. We're different." The main battle began when the human fleet spread out in a formation that made no sense to Kroger tactical doctrine. Instead of a solid wall of ships, they formed a loose cloud that stretched across thousands of kilometers. Fast attack craft darted between larger vessels, while converted civilian ships took positions that seemed completely random. Captain Rodriguez led her squadron of armed freighters in a flanking maneuver that would have been impossible for any military force bound by regulations and chain of command. Her ships moved independently, each captain using their own judgment and experience to find the best angle of attack. "Remember," she told her captains over the radio, "we're not trying to be heroes here. We're trying to save lives. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't give them a chance to hurt our people." The Kroger fleet moved to intercept the humans in perfect formation, their ships arranged in precise geometric patterns that maximized their firepower. It was textbook military strategy, the kind that had won them victory after victory across the galaxy, but humans had never been very good at following. Textbooks. The first human attack came from above and below simultaneously, catching the Kroger. Formation in a crossfire that their rigid tactics couldn't handle. Ships that had been hidden in the planet's shadow suddenly appeared, raining fire down on the alien fleet at the same time. Captain Cross's reformed squadron struck from the side, using the confusion to disable key Kroger command ships. The aliens tried to maintain formation, but their communication network was breaking down under the chaotic human assault. "They're fighting like animals," complained one of Sekmar's officers. "There's no honor in this." "Honor is for the dead," replied Major Vexstar from the planet's surface. "Sir, we have a problem down here too. The humans are landing ground forces." On Vern Prime, human marines were dropping from orbit in small groups, avoiding the major Kroger positions and striking at targets that seemed to have no strategic value. Sergeant Mike Torres led one such team, a mixed group of former soldiers, corporate security, and volunteers who had never seen combat before. "Listen up, Torres," told his squad as their drop pods streaked through the atmosphere. "We're not here to win the war. We're here to save people. The Kroger have processing centers all over the planet, and there are civilians in every one of them." The pod crashed through the roof of a Kroger detention facility, and Torres's team poured out firing. The alien guards, designed for suppressing helpless prisoners, had never faced humans who fought with the desperate fury of people protecting someone else's children. Within minutes, the facility was secured, and the Kalathi prisoners were free. Torres looked at the grateful faces of the aliens they had rescued, and felt something stir in his chest that made all the danger worthwhile. "This is what we came for," he said to his team. "Let's go find more of them." Back in space, the battle was turning into a nightmare for the Kroger. Their superior numbers and firepower meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight fair. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking where they were least expected and vanishing before the aliens could respond. General Thakmer watched his perfect formation crumble and felt the cold touch of fear for the first time in his long career. These humans weren't just different, they were insane, and they were winning. The battle for Vern Prime reached its breaking point when Admiral Kane made a decision that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. She was going to ram her flagship directly into the Kroger command ship. "Admiral, what are you doing?" Captain Hayes asked, in shock as he watched. Kane plotted a collision course. Kane looked around the bridge of the UTS Defiant at her crew. They were good people, brave people who had followed her across the galaxy to save strangers. Now she was asking them to die for those same strangers. "We need to cut the head off the snake," she said quietly. "Without their general, the Kroger fleet will fall apart. But I won't order anyone to do this. Anyone who wants to leave the bridge can go now." Not one person moved. "Well then," Kane said, strapping herself into her command chair, "let's go save some people." The Defiant accelerated toward the massive Kroger command ship, its engines pushing the vessel far beyond safe limits. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as the hull began to shake from the stress. General Thakmer watched the human ship approach and couldn't believe what he was seeing. No rational species would sacrifice their command vessel in a suicide attack. It went against every principle of military logic. "Evasive action," he screamed at his pilot, but the command ship was too big and slow to avoid the Defiant's charge. The two ships collided with the force of a small nuclear weapon. Defiant's reinforced hull, designed to survive hyperspace jumps, tore through the Kroger ship's armor like paper. Both vessels spun away from each other, trailing debris and atmosphere. On the Defiant's bridge, Kane pulled herself up from the deck where the impact had thrown her. Half her control panels were dark, and she could hear the hiss of escaping air through cracks in the hull.
"Almage," she called out.
"Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, reported Hayes, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "Life support is failing. We've got maybe 10 minutes of air left." Kane looked at the tactical display. The Kroger command ship was drifting helplessly, its engines dead, and its weapons offline. More importantly, The rest of the Kroger fleet was in chaos. Without their general's orders, they didn't know what to do. Signal the fleet, Kane ordered. Tell Captain Hayes he's in command now. Tell him to finish this. Captain Rick Hayes, the man who had been Kane's aide for 5 years, felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Through the comm system, he could hear the confusion. In the Kroger fleet, as ship captains called for orders that would never come. All ships, Hayes broadcast to the human fleet, "This is your new fleet, Commander. The enemy is broken. Let's send them home." What followed was not so much a battle as a rout. The human ships, no longer facing organized resistance, swept through the Kroger fleet like wolves among sheep. Captain Cross and his squadron of former pirates showed no mercy to ships that had been bombing civilians just hours before. "This is for every innocent person you've killed," Cross said, as his weapons tore apart a Kroger cruiser, Captain Rodriguez. "Led her freighters in a coordinated attack that trapped a group of Kroger ships against the planet's gravity well. Aliens, unable to adapt to the new situation, could only watch as their perfect formation became their doom. On the planet's surface, the Kroger ground forces were collapsing just as quickly. Sergeant Torres and his Marines had liberated 6 processing centers, freeing hundreds of Calathi civilians. The alien prisoners looked at their human rescuers with wonder and gratitude. "Why?" asked one elderly Calathi, speaking in broken common language. "Why do you help us? We are nothing to you." Torres knelt down beside the old alien, thinking of his own grandfather, who had died fighting corporate raiders on a colony world. "Far from Earth, 'cause someone asked for help," he said simply. "And where we come from, when someone asks for help, you help them." In the emergency bunker beneath the defense station, Commander Zara Velenith watched the impossible happen. The screens showed Kroger ships fleeing the system in disorder, their perfect fleet shattered by an enemy that fought like no one else in the galaxy. "Is it real?" whispered Cassara, her large eyes reflecting the light from the displays.
Nice.
"We really saved?" Before Zara could answer, the bunker's communication system crackled to life. A human voice, speaking careful Calathi, filled the chamber. "This is Sergeant Mike Torres of the Terran Federation Marines. Commander Velenith, if you can hear this, we're here to get you out." Zara looked at her people, at the faces filled with hope for the first time in days. She keyed the transmitter with shaking hands. "This is Commander Velenith. We're here. We're alive, and we ... We can't thank you enough." The rescue operation took 3 days. Human ships worked around the clock to evacuate Calathi civilians from the damaged cities and provide medical aid to the wounded. The Kroger had fled, but they had left behind terrible damage. Dr. Alina Vasquez arrived with the second wave of ships, bringing medical supplies and xenobiology experts to help treat the injured Calathi. She worked beside Calathi doctors in makeshift hospitals, learning about their biology while saving lives. "Our people are remarkable," she told Commander Velenith as they watched human and Calathi medical teams working together. "You've maintained your compassion even after everything you've been through." Zara looked out at the refugees' camps where her people were slowly rebuilding their lives. Human volunteers worked alongside Calathi civilians, clearing debris and setting up temporary shelters. The two species, so different in appearance, moved together with the easy cooperation of people united by a common purpose. "Your people are the remarkable ones," Zara replied. "Came from across the galaxy to save strangers. We'll never forget that." The news of Vern Prime spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The story of 800 human ships crossing space to answer a desperate plea became legend overnight. Other species looked at humanity with new eyes, seeing not just dangerous Deathworlders, but dangerous Deathworlders who might actually help when called upon. The Kroger Empire, meanwhile, faced something it had never experienced before: rebellion. On a dozen worlds, enslaved populations rose up against their masters, inspired by the story of aliens who had cared enough to fight for strangers. Kroger military, built for crushing helpless victims, proved surprisingly vulnerable to people who fought back. Admiral Kane recovered from her injuries aboard a hospital ship, but she would carry the scars of her sacrifice for the rest of her life. When the doctors cleared her for duty, she found a message waiting for her from Terra Command. "Admiral," the message read, "your actions at Vern Prime have changed how the galaxy sees humanity. We're establishing a new organization, the Humanitarian Response Fleet, to answer distress calls from any species that needs help. We'd like you to command it." Kane looked out the window of her hospital room at the human ships still orbiting Vern Prime, their crews helping to rebuild what the Kroger had destroyed. In the distance, she could see Calathi vessels working alongside human ships, the two species learning from each other. 6 months later, another desperate message reached human space. A mining colony under attack by raiders, a peaceful world threatened by corporate exploitation, a species facing extinction from natural disaster. Each time, the response was the same. The Deathworlder Armada would sail again, carrying with it a simple message that was reshaping galactic civilization. When innocent people cry out for help, someone will answer. And sometimes that someone comes from a small blue world where evolution taught its children that the most dangerous thing in the universe is a human with something to protect. The galaxy would never be the same. And for billions of peaceful beings living under the shadow of stronger predators, that was the best news they had ever heard. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics or their willingness to die for strangers. It was something much simpler and much more powerful. They cared. And in a galaxy that often seemed cold and empty, that made all the difference in the universe.